No, but we're talking about the church. In this whole idea that people matter, we're talking about ourselves as a church. We're talking about how we invest in people. We're talking about how we engage culture and how we need to show culture what it means for them to matter to us. We have created by social constructs, we have created a system where it says, well, people like this matter more than people like this, okay? Now, one of the most difficult realities in this is this, okay? We can get ourselves to say, okay, homeless people matter. We can get ourselves to say, that people that have been gripped by whatever addiction it is, it may be alcohol, it may be drugs, it may be pornography, it could be food, anything, okay? Those who are gripped by addiction, we need to love. Those who are in opposition to everything that we stand for, we need to love those. Those who are vulgar and offensive, those who commit sexual acts that they shouldn't, we need to express love. But one of the things that hit me really hard is it really, really is exponentially growing the terror in other nations, in our nation. People are just popping out of everywhere and doing crazy things that are ruining lives, killing people. And you know what? It's real easy to hate them, isn't it? Like, we want to hate them. I want to hate them. I'm going to be honest with you. I want to hate them. But if people matter to God, and they matter to us, even those people matter. I was watching, and I can't remember the names, forgive me. I can't remember the names of everybody involved, but there was a guy who started streaming, and he had a gun, and he walked into a neighborhood and gunned down a grandfather and a dad, African-American man. And he was arrested and all that stuff. And I remember watching, like, that week, watching an interview with the family on television. And they were weeping. They were weeping at the loss of their grandfather. They were weeping at the loss of their father. And then the daughter said this. She started to cry even more, and she said that she was weeping because a mother had lost a son, and she was talking about the man who committed the crime. And there are instances in our life where someone has done something so horrible to us, and God challenges us to love those people. And so when we talk about people matter, when we talk about saying that people matter, we've got to do our best. We've got to do our best to love everyone. And when it's hard, we got to rely on Him to help us love everyone. A little bit of a funny story. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but some of you have, especially those who've been around for a little while. Don't take that personal. But I remember growing up that I fought to get good grades, and I would just work really, really hard. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this today, but there are some parents and some grandparents that pay their kids to get A's. You've seen this before? Like, I don't know if this is like come across us, but it's like, okay, I'm going to barter with you. I'm going to gamble with you. I'm going to hope that, okay, if you can bring A's home, I'll give you $10 an A. I will give you $10 an A. I've seen it even higher than that. Like, if you bring home good grades, you will be rewarded. Now, in my day, if you brought home bad grades, it wasn't a reward. We won't talk about it. But when you brought home good grades, okay, you're doing what you're supposed to do. Awesome job. Right? Good job. And so, like, I've been watching this unfold, and I'm like, where's my money? I mean, I tried really hard as a child. I worked really hard for good grades. And what happens is this, okay? Now, I am not outside of being guilty of this, but every parent in this room has gotten to the place where your kid is acting like an absolute monster. And you're like, okay, I will give you anything you want if you shut your mouth. And then it begins to manifest in different ways. Before you even get to the meltdown, you begin to barter with them. Okay, before you even go to the grocery store, if you behave, I will do this, right? If you behave, I will do this. Or honestly, like, and you guys know my son, sometimes he can be a little bad at church. I mean, yeah. We do our best to, like, insulate and not let you guys see it. Hopefully we're succeeding. But there was a time where I'm like, dude, all right, I've got Lego minifigures. For those of you who know what those are, I've got Lego minifigures at home. If you're a good boy at church today, you'll get one. And it worked, at least for a little while. And I don't know. You better behave. But then he started saying, well, I want 2 of them. Like, okay. Now here's where it started to change. I said, no, you only get 1. Well, I'm going to be bad. See what happened? So what happens there? Our relationship with our children begins to amount to a transaction. If you are, then you get. Right? If you behave well enough, if you do what you're supposed to, if you are obedient, I will give you a gift. I will respond with a blessing. Some of you guys can definitely notice where I'm going with this. See, a shift must be made. When people matter, transactional expectations end, and leading with love that leads to transformation begins. In short, transaction demands are in form religiously driven, but transformation sets us free to experience life through Christ's love. You see, transaction means if you, then I will. Transaction means that you have to give me in order for me to give you. Transformation is a process. It's a messy process. It's a process that causes us to go a little bit and then maybe have a few steps back, right? Like, transformation cannot be measured necessarily. Like, you would think, like, I am having no success. This person is a mess. I'm trying so hard and they just keep and then you find out, like, 2 weeks or 3 weeks later that something huge was happening inside, or you were just too dumb to see it. But when we operate with transactions, we tell people when they come to church or when they start a relationship with us, you've got to in order for me to. You have to in order for God to. And we've got to step out of that kind of faith. We've got to step out of that kind of experience. You see, a transaction is a deal. It's an arrangement or a bargain. It's a negotiation. It's you perform. It's a performance and then you receive. But a transformation is, in speaking, it's a metamorphosis. Or more specifically, when we talk about our faith, transformation is a rebirth. It's something that happens in us that makes us completely different people. And some people seem to be preoccupied with obeying rules and obeying regulations, and oftentimes, we want to stack up whether or not a person is changing by how well they're behaving. But here's what happens. When we begin to operate on the ideal of do's and don'ts, it is a deadly set of principles. There's no love, there's no joy, there's no life, there's no passion. It's a mechanical form of law-keeping that we call legalism. You see, legalistic focuses only on obeying bare rules, destroying the broader context of God's love, which is redemption. And Jesus' challenge has always been to free yourself from religious complexity and love others from a position of relational simplicity. Like, free yourself from these complex algorithms, if you will, okay, that say, that there has to be this certain way of change, and there has to be this certain method of change. And we make it so hard, and we make it so difficult, and we begin to determine a person's change on how well they're doing or how well they're behaving, instead of making it simple, instead of making it not so complex, starting a conversation as opposed to making demands. Now, I heard a pastor say it this way once. You can make a statement or you can have a conversation. Now, a lot of times if you just make a statement, it will alienate people from you. But if you say, let's sit down and have a talk. Let's sit down and talk about this. You're not making a statement to say, oh, this is wrong, this is evil, this is sin. You need to change this immediately. I understand that there are those conversations that need to happen. But when you decide to live in a relationship with someone, you are beginning to, gain a closer look into their life, and they begin to break down walls when they trust you more, and then you can begin to have conversations. And here's an important thing. When you're talking to someone about the sin in their life, you must recognize that is the second step after salvation. When someone is introduced to Christ, you can't say, okay, before they make that leap and say, okay, Jesus, I'm going to make you Lord of my life, I'm going to change myself by surrendering to you and allowing that surrender to change my life. We've got to be careful that we don't start demanding change before he has come into their life. Because then we begin to teach people that there's parameters on life change. There's parameters on them experiencing the full love of Christ. And here's the hard thing. In order to do this, we have to lose our religion. In order to do this, we have to lose our religion. And we've got to ask ourselves, do we love our religion more than we love people? We will have to change the way we think about loving God and loving others. It is virtually impossible to exaggerate the authentic discipleship of love, the authentic truth of this singular virtue. Without love, we are nothing. Now, we were talking about this earlier, but as Paul was addressing some very real issues with the Corinthians. But if you go to 1 Corinthians 13, it's the love chapter, right? This is where some of this powerful and significant truth of love unfolds. But, Paul is addressing some things. Tragically, love was the very point at which the church in Corinth fell short. It had all the outward appearance. The Corinthian Christian had everything going for them. They had strong teaching, lofty knowledge, profound giftedness, dynamic worship. Nevertheless, there was one area in which this early church was glaring deficiency. They were deficient in their love. They had everything but love. And if you read this scripture as we're about to, love plus, or everything plus no love is nothing. If you have everything, but you don't attach love, if you have everything and it's not born of love and it's not birthed from a place of love, it is worthless. It means nothing. Nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. And this underlying problem in the Corinthian church was due primarily to their pride. They were self-centered, they were self-focused, and they were self-absorbed. Now, before you start pointing fingers, you'll immediately declare that you're the same. They gave undue prominence. Hey, guys, I was looking at myself this week too, so a lot of humility here. And that sounded really proud. Undue prominence to certain spiritual gifts, while at the same time they devalued the more important virtue of love. And so Paul makes it clear. Love is this selfless act. It's a volitional choice. It's something you have to do. It's an expression that has a cost, but is completely worth the cost. Now, if you look at 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 8, and then we're going to jump to verse 13, it says this: "If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not love, I have become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not love, I am nothing. If I give all my goods to feed the poor, and if I give my body to be burned, yes, and have not love, it profits me nothing." You see, love suffers long and is kind. Love envies not. Love flaunts not itself and is not puffed up, does not behave itself improperly, seeks not its own. It is not easily provoked. It thinks no evil. It rejoices not in the iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes all things, and it endures all things. Love never fails. So now abide in faith, hope, and love. These three. But the greatest is love. You see, speech without love is nothing. The Corinthian believers treasured the eloquence of public speakers. Athens was the iconic city that was the center of Greek philosophical thought. It was located only 45 miles from Corinth. And it became this cultural influence. And what happened is these public speakers were elevated to this prominent place if they knew how to speak. They were, so to speak, they were the golden-tongued persuaders of the day. They were rock stars. People looked on them with this lofty idea. They would do all these incredible things. They would create an emotional atmosphere as they spoke, and they would speak, and it would appear to be profound. It would appear to be powerful. It would appear to express this sense of this person knew how to speak in front of people. And not only that, it would instigate things inside of them, but it was empty. It was meaningless. It didn't have any value. It wasn't special at all because it wasn't born of love. I mean, there are people that can be wise. They can preach great sermons, teach the profoundest lessons, offer the wisest counsel, and give the strongest witness. But without love, what does the verse say? They become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. You ever have somebody that talks and it appears that they talk well, but it's not born of love, and it just makes your ears feel literal pain? It's just like, shut up, right? You've been there, right? It's been so frustrating. And that's what Paul is saying. These kind of people that speak a certain way, that appear to be powerful and significant, if they don't have love in their speech, it is nothing more than noise. And not just any noise, a noise that is irritating. And if you have knowledge without love, it's nothing. And Paul asserts that knowledge without love is nothing. Now, Paul, all right, who was Saul, if you read his backstory, he was trained in the law. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He had training from birth that made him understand things that nobody could understand. And he, of all people, had a right to be arrogant and proud about all the things that he knew. And he says, if I have the gift of prophecy and understanding all mysteries and knowledge, but I have not love, I'm nothing. In short, if I can see into things that nobody else can see into, if I can see truth that nobody else can see, if I have this powerful wisdom that's just amazing, but I don't love, it is worthless. It's a waste. There are a lot of people that study a lot. They look at the Greek and the Hebrew, and they allow God's word to become this book that they study. And I understand that it's critical to study, but if all you do is study to know, there is no meaning in that at all. Faith without love is nothing. I mean, he even said, if you have the faith to remove mountains, I mean, if you have this powerful faith that can move mountains, that can lift mountains up and move them out of your way, if you have that kind of faith, but you don't have love, it is worthless. It is worthless. I mean, he is targeting in a serious way the issue with this church. The faith is an unwavering, if faith is unwavering and unshakable, if it's a confidence in God, but even if Paul has such huge faith, anybody has such huge faith, but it's no love in it, it's spiritually useless. And sacrifice. When he says, if I give my body to be burned, he's definitely talking about the persecution that they were experiencing in that day. And for the sake of argument, he gives away all his earthly belongings. He says giving away all his earthly belongings to provide food for the needy. I jumped a little ahead of myself. He gives all the belongings to give to the needy, but he does not have love. What does that make him? With self-condemnation, he declares that he remains nothing without love. I could sell everything that I have. I could give all that I have to the poor. I could surrender all that belongs to me for the sake of helping others, but if it's not born of love, it's okay, buddy. If it's not born of love, it's worthless. It's worthless, right? It doesn't mean a thing. And then he says, facing death without love is nothing as well. And if I give my body to be burned and not love, it profits nothing. It profits nothing. This is a significant truth. And I mean, we kind of move through this fast, and I understand that, but I want you to take some time to study 1 Corinthians 13 and understand the powerful and strong truth that Paul is confronting this church with, and I believe confronts continually the church with. If you aren't cautioned, you will find yourself steeped in all this incredible knowledge and all this incredible faith and all this incredible, gifts that you're giving and all this fearless in death and being able to speak in profound ways. If you have all to make the magic happen, you are nothing but a puppet and a manipulator, and your work is meaningless. My work would be meaningless if it's not with love. Going back to the text for a minute here, essentially he's saying giftedness without love is nothing. And what does love look like? Well, in 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8, he spells it out very clearly. It says, love suffers long and is kind. Love suffers long and is kind. You ever had a love that required you to suffer for people? Have you ever had a love that caused you to walk into difficult situations and it came at a cost? How many of you have had someone love you and were willing to suffer long for the sake of their love for you? If you've experienced love like that, it changes your life in huge ways. And you can tell. You can notice that someone is like down in the trenches with you. Someone is not afraid to shoulder you no matter how bad you have messed up or no matter how awful someone did something to you. They're willing to endure with you. They're willing to suffer long and still be kind. Love envies not. Love flaunts not itself and is not puffed up. It doesn't envy others. Love is like saying, okay, that person is better than me at it, so let's elevate that person so they can do a better job. Now, that's hard because we want to be better, right? We sometimes struggle with other successes. It's not puffed up. It doesn't flaunt. It doesn't puff yourself up. It puts yourself aside. It puts yourself aside for the sake of others. It does not behave itself improperly. It seeks not its own. It is not easily provoked, thinks no evil. You ever find yourself walking with somebody like we're talking about in the Corinthian church here? They were all these great things, but they didn't have love at the core. And have you ever walked with somebody before and found yourself being provoked? Don't look at me like that. You're like, oh, okay, whew, I got this, right? And there is love that is just powerful and it changes you. But even the most steadfast love that you could have, you can find yourself in situations where you are being provoked. And you're like, I'm going to lash out. Something's coming. It's going to blow big. Watch out, right? Some of us, man, it happens in our own homes. I still remember the day that my wife went downstairs to my daughter's bedrooms and she just shouted out loud, I'm not raising self-entitled brats. So, I think they got the message. She was provoked, right? Now, I'm throwing her under the bus. That's terrible, but I'm provoked sometimes too easily a lot. I love and I love hard, but man, there are some things that I've experienced in my life where I'm just like, ooh, and it thinks no evil. Love thinks no evil. Now, we're like, no, I don't have evil intent for people because people matter, but what happened just the other day? Another terror attack, and we don't think evil, but sometimes we do think evil. We're like, oh, I hope that they burn. I mean, I've seen statuses before, even from, on social media, even from people who say they're Christians that say, may God smite them and ruin them and send them to hell. That's not love. That's thinking evil. It rejoices not in iniquity, which means sinfulness. It rejoices in the truth. It's excited about the truth. It's affected by the truth. It bears all things, it believes all things, it hopes all things, and endures all things. Man, that is a mouthful. There's a lot of significance in those statements. It bears all things. Yes, I'm going to hold this. I'm going to shoulder this. I'm going to be there. It believes. It has confidence. Faith increases. It hopes for. With the people you're loving, it hopes for powerful and significant things to happen. It endures all things. It endures. It bears, it believes, it hopes, it endures. Guys, it bears, it believes, it hopes, and endures. Some of us, we need that right now. We need some bearing of all things from our peers and from people who love us. We need somebody who will be with us to believe all things. We need somebody to be with us that will hope all things, that will help us endure all things. We need a dose of this in our own life. And in verse 8, it makes it significant. It says, love never fails. But if there are prophecies, they shall fail. If there are tongues, they shall cease. And if there is knowledge, it shall vanish. And then jumping to verse 13. Now, faith, hope, and love. Abide in faith, hope, and love, these three. But the greatest of these is love. Love doesn't operate by transaction. Love operates in the truth of transformation. You see, transformation is messy. It's inconvenient. We don't like it. We want stats. We want proofs. We want what is tangible and what is seen, right? We want it to be right in front of us. Okay, I can see that this person has changed in this way. That's a fact. I can see this. It's noticeable. That's a fact. I can see this. And we like that. It's more convenient. It's easier to, it's more palpable. But the truth is that transformation is something that happens deep within the soul, and it transforms people inside. You see, this is a love that is not if or because. It is a love that says, I love anyway. I love even though. I love in spite of. Now, inside your bulletin, I've got just a few things for you guys to look at, and it's just some challenge points. It's just some challenge points for you guys to look at. Look at those later. You guys just take those bulletins and put them somewhere and ask God to help you love in those 10 ways that are on there, okay? Grab a bulletin if you don't have one on your way out, but ask God to help you. Ask God to give you the strength. Ask God to put you in situations where you begin to understand the significance of love. Because nothing else is going to matter without it. I could stand up here and say awesome things, but if I don't have love, it's worthless. It's worthless. And I pray every week that myself decreases and He increases. Because if people matter, we're not going to demand and then offer. We're just going to offer. And we're going to trust that God is going to do something amazing in them, even if we can't see it right away. It's hard. As a minister, man, you just, as Christians, we just go at it with somebody and we're like, I need to see something, and you just don't see the transformation. Here's the truth. We may not see the results until heaven. Keep planting seed. Keep loving. Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for truth. God, change us. Encourage us. I pray, God, that as we grab a hold of this word, that we would go back to 1 Corinthians 13 and ask you to continue to bring revelation to us about what this looks like. God, that we would recognize that all that we could do, every spiritual prowess that we could invest ourselves in, and knowledge and speaking in tongues and prophesying and learning and just everything, God, all that we would invest ourselves in to look powerful and look significant. If there's no love in it, it's a waste. God, help us. Help me, Father. Help me, Father. And help this church. And as we love, awe us as the transformation takes place in every person that we come in contact with. Holy Spirit, draw them to you. And even when we can't see it, help us to remain steadfast and confident.